The World Cup in Qatar is becoming the most entertaining, perhaps, of all time. A bit of disappointment for those who attempted to overshadow the tournament with sanctimonious virtue signalling, including memorably the Germany players who covered their mouths before their game against Japan before losing the game 2-1 and crashing out of the tournament. They were widely mocked by Japanese supporters and Qatari TV hosts who covered their mouths and waved goodbye as the Germans got the first flight home. Well, Arsenal legend Arsene Wenger, now FIFA's head of development, summed it up rather well.
And the teams as well, who were mentally ready, like Jürgen said, at the mindset to focus on competition and not on political demonstrations.
Well, I'm thrilled to be joined now by the sportscasting legend, Bob Costas, one of America's greatest sporting commentators, a veteran of a record 12 Olympic Games, winning no fewer than 28 Emmy Awards for his peerless commentary. Bob, what a treat to have you on Piers Morgan Uncensored. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Piers. Great to see you again, even from a distance.
I have one daytime Emmy, and I've never covered an Olympic, so you're slightly ahead of me, and I bow to your superiority quite willingly. This whole issue, Bob, I just couldn't think of a better person to talk to about where the line is drawn between political activism, or social justice activism for that matter, and sport, and this issue of sport washing, whether it's in golf with the live golfers and the PGA at war, whether it's what we've been seeing in Qatar at the World Cup with people saying they're going to protest, then not protesting, then being ridiculed for it. Others, like the Iranian players, making a genuinely powerful stand against oppression of their women back home. Going right back, perhaps, to Colin Kaepernick, who was, of course, the NFL player who took the knee for the first time. And the England players at this World Cup are still taking the knee in his honour, I guess, because he was the one who started it. So it's a lot of stuff going on in this area. What is your overview of political activism and sport?
I think, Piers, we have to make distinctions from one situation to another, one person to another. Just because I may agree with a general cause or issue and with the person's right to make a statement doesn't mean that I have to agree with everything they say under that banner. Colin Kaepernick is a good example. There's no question, even if some people may overstate the severity, there's no question that police reform is an important issue in the United States. And where it needs to be reformed, the burden primarily falls upon people of color in the United States. That's legitimate. But then when Colin Kaepernick subsequently says, I don't vote because the oppressors will never allow you to vote your way out of your oppression. When he said that, Barack Obama was president. I guess he didn't vote when Donald Trump ran against Hillary Clinton, and then Donald Trump became president. That's a silly and naive thing to say, even if I respect the initial point that Colin Kaepernick wanted to make. Within this year's World Cup, the Iranians not only are making a very important point, it's a courageous point to make, because heaven knows what might happen to any of them when they return home, and they're directly involved in that. Some might say that others at a safe distance, covering their mouths or whatever, are merely virtue signaling. But then it all circles back to the IOC, in their case, putting 2 Olympics in China, another one in Vladimir Putin's Russia, and FIFA now going to Qatar. As you have stated previously, and I agree with this, obviously, every nation has flaws and problems and issues and things that they need to correct and shame in their past, and maybe in some cases in an ongoing way. But then there are nations in the here and now, we're not talking about history, in the here and now that are fundamental human rights abusers. Qatar is one of those. China is certainly one of those. Putin's Russia is one of those. And these athletes will never have a platform that will draw as many eyes and make as large an impact as they do at an Olympics or at a World Cup. And it's ironic that FIFA and the IOC say, let's keep politics out of this. Please keep politics out of this. But they're the ones who put politics in it by placing these events in places like Qatar and Sochi and in Beijing. So as long as the protest, whatever it may be, is not within the match or the game itself, because people do want to watch the game or the match for its own sake, and it's very exciting. I think you undermine your own cause if you get in the way of the game itself. But surrounding the game, or for commentators in the programming that precedes the game or at halftime or post-game, then I think it's okay.
You see, well, a brilliant response, as I would have expected, and very thoughtful. and nuanced in many places. I would take issue, I think, about a couple of things you said. The main one, I think, is this. There was a lot of, I think, over-the-top virtue signaling about Qatar from the UK in particular. Not from America, interestingly. But in the UK, a lot of sort of anger built up in the very last minute about a World Cup that was awarded 12 years ago. The Middle East has never had a World Cup. If the stick to beat the Middle East on human rights is ill treatment of migrant workers and LGBT rights, for example, then you're basically saying you can't have a sports tournament in the Middle East at all, because they would all have similar issues with migrant worker treatment and outlawing LGBT rights completely in most countries. But you'd also have the same situation in Africa. You'd have the same situation in China, the same situation in vast swathes of India, of Russia, and so on. And so I think that what I would say back to you, Bob, on that point, once you start putting the moral halo on about human rights, I'm not sure you can end up with many places in the world which are clean enough to actually host, say, a World Cup. And I'll throw it back to you in this way. You and I have both actually got into trouble at different times in our careers in America, yours more successful than mine, about gun control, for example. You expressed a view about gun control when you were on air once and got a lot of blowback. I did a lot more and got a lot more blowback and got told to go back to the UK. But the next World Cup is in America, shared with Canada and Mexico. Should people be taking a strident view, for example, about gun violence in America as an issue, about abortion laws, which have just dramatically changed, which are very contentious in many other parts of the world, what America's done there? In other words, if you continue down the road of putting a halo on and deciding who is fit to host these things, I think you've got to be consistent and accept that every country, including America, including Britain, which helped America illegally invade Iraq, of course, in 2003, that we all have actually pretty big abuses which would be quite hard to defend.
Yeah, there are matters of degree. The points you make are legitimate. And by the way, just parenthetically, as you know, my point about guns in America and as it affects athletes was to say that there is a gun culture in America, not to take issue with the fundamental idea of the Second Amendment, right, which is a big deal in the United States. But even if you believe in the Second Amendment, you should also be able to recognize that there's a lot of irresponsibility surrounding guns, and some of it had crossed over into sports. So that was the comment I was trying to make. But sometimes people get irrational about certain things, hear what they want to hear, and take it from there. So forgive me for that parenthetical aside. I think the point you're making is legitimate, but it's a question of degree. If we're looking for a perfect nation, maybe you'd have to hold every Olympics in Switzerland, right, which ironically enough is where the IOC is located, in Lausanne. But we're talking about degree. The United States most certainly has its problems, and athletes historically and sometimes movingly have registered their complaints and their protests about that. But Qatar, Putin's Russia, Beijing, they are fundamental human rights abusers. It's definitive about them, rather than flaws that the nations we're talking about, the United Kingdom or the UK, America, Canada, they are actively trying to address, however imperfectly, however haltingly. It's within their DNA, it's within the American Constitution to address these inequities and injustices, whereas it is the policy of the governments of Qatar and China and Putin's Russia to oppress people and engage in many cases, Russia in this case, international treachery. Did the United States make a huge mistake post 9/11 in invading Iraq? Yes, they did. But I think you could make a strong case that that is not fundamentally what the United States is about.
I mean, it's an interesting rejoinder. I mean, I would say, having been in Qatar last week, there's a lot of, I think, resentment and raised eyebrows about what they perceive to be the West's moral hypocrisy. And they feel quite strongly about it, that they've been over-demonized and the West under-demonizes itself and doesn't want to turn the same critical eye to its own moral failings. And they pointed to, like in the UK, for example, we have appalling drug abuse now in our country. It's sort of rife with drugs now. Appalling knife crime. All sorts of metrics for sort of moral degeneration, if you like, which is anathema to a lot of people in the Middle East, where the drug laws are incredibly draconian. There's very little knife crime of the kind we have in the UK and so on. So it was actually being there on the ground was really quite interesting. And it's not to defend everything that they stand for, but I do think it's a commonality through the Middle East, pretty much what Qatar represents. And they believe they're representing the whole region with the World Cup. And I have to say, having been there, Bob, it was a very good atmosphere. It felt very safe. Everything was, running very smoothly. And it's not like, I know the Germans ran the trains well under Hitler. It's more, I was there and they all seemed to be having a pretty good time, I have to say.
Well, the World Cup is a wonderful event. And from what I hear from a distance, it has been run smoothly, just as you say. One thing I heard repeatedly when I hosted the Olympics, I always asked the heads of the IOC when they brought them in for an interview, what is it with this seeming affinity for authoritarian nations with the IOC? And the answer always was, we feel that by holding an Olympics anywhere, it helps to spread the Olympic ideals of equality and diversity and democracy. It helps to spread those ideas. How's that working out with China? How's that working out with Putin's Russia? Mm-hmm. And we'll see if there are any reforms in Qatar or Iran. I tend to doubt it.
Right. Bob, I could talk to you all night. What I wanted to ask you before I let you go, you've interviewed so many fascinating people in the sporting world. If you could literally, if it was your last hour on Earth, which I hope won't come for a very long time, who would you, of every sportsman and woman you've ever met, who would you most like to spend that hour with? Dead or alive?
Well, if it's the one... All right, well, then you just answered the question. Dead or alive, because of my affinity for baseball, I would like to sit Babe Ruth down with Jackie Robinson. Babe Ruth was the greatest player pre-integration. Jackie Robinson is not the greatest player, although he's a great player, but he's perhaps the most significant player in the modern history of baseball. And to have them talk not only about baseball, but about the country they grew up in. Ruth at the turn of the century and Jackie Robinson in the middle of the 20th century. That's the interview I'd like to conduct.
Brilliant. I would choose Sir Donald Bradman, who statistically, Australian batsman, cricket, statistically the greatest sportsman of all time. The gap between him and the second-placed international average player was greater than the gap between 1 and 2 of any other sport in the world.
I once referred to Sir Donald in a piece on HBO as the Babe Ruth of cricket.
And in fact, there's a great picture of the two of them meeting. It's a wonderful picture. Yeah, Bradman and Babe Ruth. It's an amazing picture. Bob, thank you so much for joining me. Honestly, I could talk to you all night. You're such a fascinating guy, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Piers. Hope we talk again soon.
Good to talk to you. All the best. You lead a righteous life?
I think I do, yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
You boasted openly of having 6, 7 partners at once. So is that righteous? I'm not taking there's no moral view from me. Simply asking you what you think righteous means.
I think righteous is living true to your heart and knowing that you're doing good by people, not snaking anybody, not lying to anybody. I know I live a very righteous life.
Have you ever been in love?
Yeah.
How many times?
Plenty. I believe in love between men and women.
Real love, where it's...
I believe,
how many times would you say?
Enough. I believe men and women are a beautiful union. I think we're slightly different, but when we work together, we're the most powerful force in the world.
Now, how many women have you loved?
I don't know, Piers. A few.
Give me a ballpark. 5, 10, 20?
Let's say...
You don't forget how many people you've been in love with.
Let's say 10. I mean, I've been in love, and I certainly believe that men and women, when they work together, it's the most beautiful force on the planet. I believe in family. I believe in children. I believe in...
If you believe in family and children and love, why are you single?
I'm not single.
Well, you're not married. That's what I mean.
Well, if I was married, the last thing I would do is advertise it to the feral psychopaths on the internet. So
I'm not a feral psychopath.
Well,
you called me friend earlier.
Can be debated, Piers. But the point I'm making as a whole is that all of these.
Do you want to get married? Is my point.
No, but let's please for a second.
You don't or you do?
Let's please for a second, because you've interrupted me so many times I've failed to...
Well, actually, I've only
full
interrupted
answer.
you, just to be clear, when you've actually answered a different question.
Cool. Well, then on all these points you're
And
making...
you've admitted that.
On all these points you're making, on repeat, you're taking these sentences and on repeat you're using you're weaponizing them against me.
I'm not weaponizing anything.
Okay, it's fine.
No. You're weaponizing the weaponizing, which doesn't exist.
No problem. But
you said to me, come on, bring it on, read out all the things that you think are blatant misogyny. All I've done is literally read out all the things we identified from all the research that I thought were blatantly misogynist.
Understood.
And giving you the chance to respond. And the only time I've interrupted you is when you've tried to answer a completely different question.
Understood, Piers. But these things were said in large context where often I'm talking about how, for example, on the same podcast where you've read one of them sentences from, I was talking about how it's a man's duty to die by a woman. And the guy asked me, he said, if 10 men with knives attacked your woman, wouldn't you just... I said, yeah, I'd stand and die. I'd never just run away because I have a duty as a man. I must die on the spot to protect her honor and my honor. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about a man having responsibility to his duties. I'm talking about the old traditional ways of masculinity. And what happens is a few sentences from such a long conversation is taken and used against me.
I understand that.
So I want you to understand that I'm talking about protecting and providing for women. I'm talking about a man making sure...
Do you want to get married?
No, but we have to all feed into each other, Piers. I'm talking about
It's not a hard question.
No, but I'm talking about protecting and providing for a woman. I'm talking about a man being responsible for her safety.
I understand.
So of course I believe in men and women. Of course I believe in love. Of course I believe in marriage. Of course I believe in family.
No, but none
the
of that was
idea
my
that I don't believe in
Andrew,
the idea that I don't believe in these things
I
is
didn't
crazy.
ask you if you believed in it. I asked you if you're going to get married.
One day, absolutely.
You'd like to.
If I'm not married already, I will be married one day. If I'm not.
Well, you might be secretly married.
I could be married, correct.
Why would you not tell me either way?
Why would I advertise to the feral psychopaths of the world who have tried their very best to destroy me for an opinion about my private life and the things that are most sacred to me? Why
Well, you
would
think
I do
if
that?
you said you were married, everyone would hate you?
I don't know about people hate me. It's about me understanding that I'm a hard target, but I am very, very protective of the people I care about.
Right. But you believe in the concept of marriage?
Completely. That's what we were talking about the whole time.
What do you think?
We talked about a man giving a woman away.
Okay.
I believe in marriage more than anybody. In
here's
fact,
my-
I believe in marriage in... No, please.
Okay.
I believe in marriage in the traditional sense. I believe a man has a duty to stand up and be a real man. I believe that the problem with the world today that we are facing is that not enough men are sticking to the age-old ways of masculinity. Mm-hmm. I believe that me standing up and saying a man must protect a woman and provide for her, so he needs to make sure that she's safe. He needs a degree of authority to
I
protect
have no
her.
problem with...
But people do have a problem with it.
I'm not... Sorry.
And that's the world we're in now.
Andrew, Well, next, Andrew Tate will spend the next month behind bars in Romania after losing the latest appeal against his detention. Tate and his brother Tristan are being held as part of an investigation into rape and human trafficking. Well, speaking outside court, Andrew Tate said he's done nothing wrong.
You know I'm innocent. There's not much justice in Romania.
Well, the pack is still with me. Plus, joining me now is the lawyer for the Tate brothers, Tina Glandian, who is in Romania. Well, welcome to you, Ms. Glandian. I really appreciate you joining me. Where are we with this case? It seems that every now and again this pops up back on television with them being remanded for further time. How long can that process continue before a charging decision is made?
Under Romanian law, they have up to 180 days, which is in 30-day increments. So every time there's a 30-day detention order, they're allowed to renew their request and have it extended for an additional 30 days, but not to exceed 180 days.
OK, you've taken on this case. Andrew Tate has been repeatedly bellowing his innocence as he's been led in and out of these court hearings and so on. Do you believe them? Do you believe that he and his brother are innocent?
At this point, Piers, they've had this investigation going since April. We're now February, and there are not even charges filed against them. So this is a huge injustice the way we see it. They should not be detained at this point. We think it's now crossed over to the point where it's violating international human rights law because the deprivation of your liberty pre-trial is the most severe form of punishment a state can impose. And that's what they've done in this case. And they've had a very lengthy investigation with the government's resources. They've been analyzing and looking at all of their devices since April when they seized everything. And here we are, February, and charges aren't filed. So I think there's absolutely no evidence that's been presented. And that's our position.
I mean, how are your clients at the moment? How is Andrew Tate dealing with incarceration? I mean, I interviewed him just before Christmas. We had a long, wide-ranging interview.
Yes.
And once again, I was struck by the phenomenal following that he has online, particularly with young men. You know, he has an enormous following there. You and I know this has been whipped up now by that community into a huge framing of a narrative that this is complete injustice. There are others who think this has been a long time coming, that he's a bad human being and that he's going to face very serious charges, and that will be the last we see of him. But how is he faring right now, given that at the moment he's in this limbo land of no charging but being held in incarceration?
The brothers are both very strong, they're resilient, and they're holding up. But obviously, the conditions are not good. They're in a Romanian jail cell, and they've been detained for a very lengthy period at this point. They have limited access to their attorneys. It's not a good condition for them.
You've obviously represented a lot of people.
And as far as...
Sorry, please finish.
I was going to say, to your second point, they're controversial public figures, but that's not a crime. And at this point, we have not been provided any proof that they've committed any crimes, nor have they even been charged. So I would ask that people presume them innocent as they are.
Do they feel that they are being tried in the court of public opinion?
I think the public is divided, as you know. I think they have a big following, but at the end of the day, yes, I think there is a lot of information in the public. I think there's a lot of false allegations in the public. I think some evidence has now been put forth. Again, I don't want to comment too much on the facts of the case since there is an ongoing criminal investigation. However, I think there has been evidence put out, videos and other statements for the public to see what the supposed state of the evidence actually is.
It's been interesting to watch Andrew Tate's Twitter feed in particular, that he's continued to tweet. Is he doing that himself? Has he got people doing that for him? And how do you feel from a legal point of view? Is it a wise tactic to continue to do that on social media when you're being held in custody by the Romanian authorities?
Well, again, he doesn't have access, so he's not doing anything directly. And what's being put out is on his accounts, and I'm not going to speak as to, the source of the posts and what's being put out. But I think, again, as of now, he's not charged with anything, and he's free to comment publicly if he wishes to.
Yeah, we know that they seized nearly £3.5 million in cash, 11 luxury sports cars, guns and other weapons. Are any of the things that have been seized from the property, are they in themselves acts of law breaking, just the possession of any of these things?
To my knowledge, they're not. I think if they were, they would have been charged with crimes. Again, they had the initial search in April, and it's February. It's been 10 months, and no charges have been filed whatsoever. We have an ongoing criminal investigation for which this is a preventative detention, which is why they're in custody. Again, this is the most severe form of punishment. I don't think it's justified under these circumstances where the prosecution hasn't set forth enough evidence to charge them, and yet they are detained and it's being prolonged.
But you do accept, of course, that if the women who've come forward here as part of the investigation, if they're telling the truth, these are very serious allegations against your clients, which could lead to charging, and if they're led to charging, could lead potentially to long prison sentences if found guilty.
Certainly the crimes at issue are very serious crimes, and I think, Piers, actually it was on your show when you interviewed Tate several months ago. He made very strong statements about his position on rape, and he condemned rape, and he said it was disgusting, was, I'm pretty sure, the word he used, and he said he thought that somebody who does that deserves the death penalty. So there's no question that these are serious charges, and even in his own words, they're very serious charges. There just isn't any evidence that they committed these crimes.
But we've also had tapes which have emerged in the last few weeks of him talking about rape to a woman in a pretty unsavory manner. So what is your response to that?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. You said what surfaced?
There have been various tapes have surfaced in part of media investigations in the last few weeks, including Andrew Tate talking about rape to a woman in a pretty unsavory manner. So what would your reaction be to that?
First of all, I think the authenticity of anything that is presented through the media as opposed to turned over to the defense needs to be questioned, because material is edited and it's easily manipulated. So first, I would say that. Secondly, I don't think certain text messages, I'm not here to judge or to talk to people's desires or fetishes, but certainly somebody could easily set someone up by saying they have certain fantasies, they want certain things done to them or said to them. And so there's a lot that goes into. You can't take a text message out of context. You first have to know, first of all, the entire context of it and what the background is. There needs to be explanation. So I think you have to keep all of that in mind when you're seeing something in the media.
We do, and we have to keep in mind also the judge's reasoning for all this. They explained on the 20th of January that they viewed the particular dangerousness of the defendants and their capacity to identify victims with increased vulnerability in search of better life opportunities. So all of this has to be taken into account. But it goes on, and as you rightly say, at the moment, there have been no charges against your clients. And until or if that point arrives, we're in a world of allegation, not actual charges.
Correct. And right now, exactly, there's a presumption of innocence that every accused has, and that attaches from the time you're even charged. And here, we're not even there. They haven't even charged them with crimes. So any sort of comments as to their alleged dangerousness, there's no evidence of that. There isn't even a presumption of that. They need to be presumed innocent, and that hasn't happened in this case. There's really a lack of evidence, and they are being detained unlawfully at this point.
Tina Glandian, I appreciate you joining me. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Piers.
From here in Doha, Qatar at the World Cup, Richard Keys and Andy Gray were the famous faces of Sky Sports Premier League coverage for a generation. As English football became a global sensation, they became household names. But they lost it all in a notorious scandal over sexist comments made off-air about a female assistant referee, and they've since moved their careers and their lives to here in Qatar. I spoke exclusively to them earlier in their first UK TV interview in a decade since it all went down. Why did you say yes to me?
Well, it's quite simple. You're Piers Morgan, you're the governor.
Yeah, I kind of like your style, to be honest.
Yeah.
Piers. I think, would it be Marmite? Piers' style?
Very much, yeah. I think.
And I don't like Marmite, but I quite like your style. So we had a chat, and it wasn't, as we might suspect, it wasn't a done deal when we were asked, but I kind of said to Richard, I'd like to talk to Piers.
We are, as my great friend, late great Ray Wilkins would say, we're a tad bruised.
Yeah.
And so therefore we withdrew entirely from engaging with the British media. And we've largely concentrated on the opportunity that was afforded to us here. We've had an absolute ball for a decade. The other thing that I thought you were very fair about, Piers, was your attitude towards this World Cup, the country, friends that we've made in the time that we've been here.
Just to start with the fact the World Cup's here, you guys have lived here for the last decade. What do you make of the way that, particularly in the UK, there's been this narrative about Qatar? They shouldn't have the World Cup. It was won with corruption. There are all these problems with LGBT rights, migrant workers. But to me, these are all legitimate concerns.
Agreed.
But I also think there's been a lot of hypocrisy.
I don't remember this outcry as intense as it's been in for such a long time around Russia 4 years ago. I don't.
And that was 4 years after they invaded Crimea, right? And with exactly the same record about human rights when it comes to
LGBTQ rights.
LGBT and so on and so on. So I do feel there's a lot of hypocrisy.
There's a war raging in Yemen.
Right.
But my view on yes, there is a lot of hypocrisy. None of us condone what Putin has done and would wish to do as far as his excursion into the Ukraine is concerned. But I think that resonated more in Europe because white faces were being seen in distressing situations. If the colour of the face is different, it doesn't quite resonate to the same degree.
I think
as unfortunate as that is, it's true. So here we've had different wars at different times that we've had to come to terms with, and they haven't necessarily made a line of copy in the UK. So, yeah, all of the things that have been mentioned, we understand, and I think the country here more than any in this part of the world understands. But I think it was you that made the point when I was listening the other week. If you accept the principle that a World Cup is coming to the Middle East, and it should, where are you going to play it if not Qatar?
Right. And by the way, for the same reason, do you then go and play it in Africa, which has many of the same issues? Do you go to India? Do you go to China? I mean,
What about 4 years from now in America?
Right,
You mentioned it in your
I made a
interview.
point. I've lived in.
Yes.
Listen, I love America.
Yeah.
I've lived there on and off for nearly 20 years. But I don't agree with some of their laws, gun laws, some of their state laws about abortion now. I wonder if people will take the high moral ground about America's laws. I doubt they will with the same ferocity they have
I don't think
here.
it'll get a mention, Piers, because again, I refer you back to what I just said about. Listen, a lot of what the criticism levelled at this country has bordered, if not has been racist. It has been shocking.
Piers, let me tell you about, you say overnight, and in all honesty, this country I live in now bears no resemblance to the one I moved into 10 years ago.
In what way?
And the way it has changed, its views, its laws, the kafala that used to be in here that restricted people, I think, from travelling and whatever, that's all been gone. They're modifying everything in that respect, and they are trying to move on. But as you said, they're doing it slowly, and maybe that's not to everyone's satisfaction. Maybe it's too slow.
If you were being critical, what would you say? What would be your biggest criticism?
Wow,
I think all of the issues that you've mentioned...
Could do with another couple of golf courses.
All of those factors should be taken as seriously as they have been. But you can't use them to consistently, whilst change is taking place, at the pace of the Qatari government. And again, you shouldn't be dictated to by the West and whatever we believe to be valuable and important in life. You have to follow this. No. It's been a slow process, perhaps in some areas too slow, but progress has been made virtually every day since we came here. And Andy's right, it's a totally different country to the one we moved to, and it's a very enjoyable place to enjoy.
Let's get to why you came here, right? So the last time many people would have seen, if they don't watch your commentaries now, would have been when you were riding unbelievably high at Sky. Premier League was on fire. You guys were the front men for it. Life was good. You were superstars, really, of British TV, especially in football. And then bang.
Do you recognise any of that?
Yeah, just me.
I used to watch you guys. I love you guys, right? You're an integral part of my football watching life. Yeah. And then bang. Do you regret saying the things you said, albeit they were said privately?
Of course. Listen, yes. I questioned whether a young lady from Coventry, my hometown, would know the offside law as she made her debut.
It was a female linesman.
Yeah. I, on air, because I was not sure who her father was, actually on air as we went to the kick-off said, and we also have a female assistant, we call them these days. Good luck to her, Sian. I don't know, I may have gone to school with her dad. She's from my manor, so all the very best to her. She made a number of errors first half that I was insistent we didn't show, nor did we. She got one absolutely spot on, the goal that was scored against Liverpool, I believe. When I spoke to her the following day, she was great. She said, hey, come on. Now,
you rang her to apologise?
Yes, of course.
And she accepted the apology?
She more than accepted it. She said, I expected this last week. It's just a bit of fun. Come on, Keezy. I'd never really come across that word banter. She said, oh, come on, it's just banter. And that, I suppose, stuck in my mind. And I said, no. I said, Sian, this is really serious now. It's got a life of its own. I have to make this an official apology on behalf of myself and Andy, who's in commentary now. She went, well, right, OK, I'm waiting. So I did. And then she went, oh, by the way, a couple of things first half that you didn't show. Thank goodness for that. Thank you. I said, well, we're not in that business. So yes, in isolation, those my questioning whether she knew the offside law was unacceptable.
Without anybody, honestly, in sports television at the time, very few people would survive all their private conversations being made public. I don't think that's not because everyone's awful. It's because the banter that you alluded to earlier was very prevalent.
I hate, by the way, I hate that word, and I'd never, as I said, I'd never used it. But Sean said to me, I expected it last week. Oh, come on, it was only banter. And I suppose that was in my head. And at the time, when you're on the defensive, because you can't get your head around what's going on, it's an extraordinary place to be. You know, you've set the dogs on many in a different role.
Well, I've been on the receiving end too.
You've also been on the receiving end.
So I've been poached return gamekeeper.
So
I know what it's like.
It's a terrible place to be.
If you had your time again, would you have done anything different in the way you responded?
Yes.
What would you have done?
I would have accepted quicker that what people were saying to me was accurate, and I would have understood sooner that what happened shouldn't have done. But you're not in that place, and but I've said many times to friends, given the same circumstances again, of course I would have gone at things differently. But you also have to then factor in mental health, which I think people too quickly dismiss, less so now than they have. For the first time in my life, I found myself in a very difficult place. I couldn't get my head around it, Piers. It didn't at that time seem to be so significant to start the forest fire that was engulfing us.
Alluded to the fact that you had suicidal thoughts at one stage.
Yeah.
No, it was serious.
Yeah, that's serious. I mean, you talked about it. I had a wonderful life. Fortunate, lucky. I played 17 years as a footballer. It was glorious. Best years of my life.
15. You can't count the
and
last
the last two were a bit iffy, I'll give you that. Yeah, okay. And then went to work in the sport I love for a new broadcaster that was about to revolutionise football in the way it did, and had 20 years there. So I suddenly found myself in a really dark place. The house surrounded by people. And I knew I had done something wrong. Of course I did. But I couldn't compute it. And my head was gone. And if it hadn't been for my wife, I don't know what would have happened. I really don't. Rachel was amazing. Wonderful.
You were that low?
Yeah, I was close to going down the garden where I used to have a pond down at the garden with a little bottle and a few pills, and I would have nipped down. I was that bad. One day, I was that bad. Yeah. But
I mean, that's so horrific.
People who know me will probably think, yeah, you're kidding, because you're too.
No, but I can see it in your face now, even as you think about it again.
Horrible.
It's a very emotional thing to relive for you.
Horrible. I couldn't work it out. I knew I'd done wrong, but I thought, for 2 weeks I couldn't get out of the house. Just surrounded by press and TV cameras and crews, and amazing. Weird, really weird. But we're through it now. I am through it now.
And your family was what saved you?
Yeah, Rachel and the kids and pals. Friends, people who. You learn who your friends are, Piers, when things like that happens to you, and I think we both did, didn't we? We both learned.
Did you know how low Andy was?
Yes, I was there too.
Same?
Oh.
What, feeling suicidal?
Oh, Piers.
Really?
You have no idea. It's mental health. He's right. You can't explain. You look back now with a clear head and you go, "What? Come on, what are you thinking?" But when you're in that place. And he's right. You couldn't. I used to have to leave my house from my back garden. I would walk to a local nursery that was close by. I got in a taxi and I flew out here actually because Nasser Al Khalifi, who I'd worked for earlier, 2008, and he wanted me to join then. And of course I should have done, but I was too comfortable. I should have taken his offer, but didn't. So he called and said, "Look, nobody's talking about it out here. Why don't you come out here?" But then the heat got too much, and I felt I had to back away for us because it was going to bring too much attention to this country, and they didn't need to inherit our problems at that time. So we put it on a burner. So in effect, I lost two jobs we lost 2 jobs in 2 weeks. One of them of our own volition. But no, it's. Do
you think it was wrong that you lost your jobs?
Well,
you talked about how it made you feel.
Well, let me ask you. Can I ask you then? Can I turn that on you?
Yeah.
Because I would like to know. Do you think it was wrong we lost our jobs?
Well, it's interesting. When I've looked at it all again, it feels to me like an overreaction by everybody, because I think that you made fulsome apologies. I know Karen Brady, for example, who is one of the bosses at West Ham, and when one of her players got caught kicking a cat around, horrendous video came out, she said everyone deserves second chance and forgiveness. And yet I remember her reaction to when you two were sacked, and it was a different reaction. And I felt there was a real kind of feeding frenzy to do you in, which with hindsight now looks like it was overdone. But mainly because you didn't say this on air. And I do think that everybody, anyone who had all their private conversations put onto public domain, I'm not sure many people would survive it.
They wouldn't survive, Piers. I mean, you've been in more green rooms probably you can count and had conversations with guests off mic, and if half of the things that you talk about were run, the people would be horrified. Private conversations are why they're called a private conversation.
Andy, who let you down most in the world of football that you would have expected to defend you when you look back?
At that time?
Yeah.
Lots of people. I wouldn't want
Are there any that stick in your mind?
I wouldn't want to name too many of them. My real friends were there, without a shadow of a doubt, and I knew who they were. I mean, Andy Townsend. We've talked about Andy. He was one of my neighbours then, and I was sitting there in the kitchen one day, just head was all over the place. The next minute, the gates opened and this motorbike, a rider comes right down the drive. He's got an extra helmet under his arm. He comes screeching in, and it's Andy. Takes the hat off. He's got that, and I'm like, "What are you? Come on!" I said, "What? I'm getting you out of here." I said, "No, you're not." I was. He said, "Yeah, come on, put this helmet on. We'll get up to the gate, and then we'll do a runner." I said, "No, I can't." But that's the kind of friend that was there. But there were lots of people that I looked after, Piers, in various ways and various things that I never heard from, and I've never heard from probably in 20 years. And if I had, I would tell you.
Let me ask you. I mean, have you guys? I think every bloke, right? We're all. How old are you now, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 50 next year.
Yeah, you're 50. Plus that.
How old are you guys?
I'm 65, Piers.
And
I am 67 in 2 days.
And I'm 57. I think every bloke has probably gone through a little bit of re-evaluation in recent years about what is appropriate and not appropriate in terms of how you act, what you say. Have you guys, since what happened to you, have you gone through that process?
Yes,
yourself?
and I sometimes look at what you've got to say on different matters, and I think to myself, no, Piers, come on. Because if we are to find a balance, then we have to overbalance in one direction in order to get back to the middle. Because for too long, men have had everything their own way. And we're looking to try and find middle ground. And if we're not going to do that just by us, in my view, we've got to go here, and we have to accept a lot of the things that irritate you particularly and drag them to the centre ground, and then we might find a better balance.
Because I know the moment I announce I've done this interview, we all know what's going to happen. There'll be people on Twitter, why are you interviewing those sexist dinosaurs?
Because dinosaurs ruled the world for about 300 million years. So I'm really not
You're proud to be a dinosaur.
Very much so.
I kind of
Embrace it, Piers.
I kind of stay away from social media most of the time, Piers. I've not been a fan of it for that kind of reason. I'm too old. I'm too old to be.
To those who think that's what you are, because of what happened 10 years ago, what do you say to them?
Talk to anyone who knows me. Really, I can't defend myself. It's easy to defend myself, but that would be wrong. People know me, Piers. People who have been my friends and talk to my family. Anyone who knows me, ask them. And if they turn around and say to you, yeah, he's definitely a sexist, then I would be very, very surprised. So, that's it.
If you were offered jobs again in the UK, would you go back?
I am deeply loyal to the company that I work for and with. I think there is a process at which now I would be able to, engage, yes. But there is no suggestion of that being the case. But yeah, listen, I find it extraordinary, honestly, because in life things happen for a reason, I believe. I wouldn't wish upon any, but well, I might one or two exceptions, but I wouldn't wish on the majority what we went through. But I, as a result, have lived a wonderful life here.
I mean, I feel, and I might be completely wrong here, but just from the interview you gave to the Telegraph and from just things I picked up, and even today, actually, that I think that maybe you've come to terms with what happened better, in the sense that you're ready to sort of leave it. I feel with you, Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, There's still a lot of anger about what happened.
No, I just not.
And resentment.
No, I don't think that's necessarily true. I'm very comfortable at the place we're in, but I will always carry a little bit of anger in my back pocket. And I don't think that's a bad thing. If that is to be used by way of motivation, then I'm very happy with that as well. But no, there are a number of. It's instinct, Piers. It's something that you would do. You would want to know what happened. I can't. That's how my mind is.
If you let bitterness eat you up,
No, it's not bitterness.
that in its way.
I don't think it's bitterness.
How would you categorise?
I would say it still is a back pocket full of anger.
Yeah.
That's all.
When you think about it.
Yeah, and I do for him. When I see my mate sat there, as distressed as he was talking about it, I feel protective, and then that stirs, a little bit more of me to get on the front foot, and that's how it's been.
A couple of quick football questions. I can't not ask you, given we're here at the World Cup in your backyard. But can England win the World Cup?
They can.
They can.
Will they?
That's a different question.
They're capable.
Yeah.
What will it depend on?
Well, all sorts of things.
Harry Kane
you're a football
getting...
man. Not losing Kane would be obviously a huge factor.
He doesn't look fit to me.
No, his ankle looks dodgy.
If it's not England, who do you fancy? Who do you think are the standout
one of my favourites, a really strong. I thought Belgium would make a real impression here.
I also think Portugal, with my old buddy Cristiano. Do you think he was right to do the interview with me?
No.
Why?
Not at this time of his career. I thought it was badly timed. I didn't think he needed to volunteer for the aggravation that it's brought him. Were I you, I would have said to him, listen, I'm very, very keen that you sit down and talk with me, but let's get you sorted out first, because we don't want to taint the legacy. We don't want you leaving Manchester United under a cloud, and there's no reason that you should.
Roy Keane left after a similar outburst on Man U TV, and he's revered.
Do you think it's tainted his legacy?
No.
At all? No.
I don't think a few months' problems with Eric Ten Hag and the coach he had never heard of before that Ranieri, I don't think it's going to make any difference to the legacy of Ronaldo.
So you think in time Manchester United fans will say, forgive?
He remains one of the greatest players they've ever had. And in terms of...
What if they have a view of Ronaldo the same as you've just suggested public do still of us? It's going to be a long time.
You know what Cristiano said to me? You're never going to please everybody, so you may as well be true to yourself.
That's true.
Anyway, guys...
Well, you see what we've done here? We're now interviewing you.
You know what? It's great to see you.
It's great to see you. Enjoy Qatar.
In your own
Enjoy Qatar,
home. I've enjoyed my time here, and I'm glad you guys have enjoyed it. And I hope this interview goes a way to, making people realise what you've been through. And
we'll end as we started, Piers. It is kind of you to offer the invitation for us to come and talk to you. And I know one of your objectives when you took this job was to uncancel people. And if you've played a role... I think so, don't you?
I don't think you should be.
I don't know.
I don't think almost anyone should be irrevocably cancelled.
Agreed.
I'm not sure what more you can do than show remorse, say you wish you hadn't said those things, but they were said privately. A lot of other people were saying similar stuff at the time. I heard them, right, in some cases, right, in the football world. And I think that the reaction was overdone.
You're very kind to have given us this opportunity.
Good to see you guys.
Thank you.
Come on, England.
You going for a swim?
I might actually. Good to see you. Well, Elon Musk is a crazy, brilliant, weird genius. And right now, probably the most fascinating businessman in the world. This is a guy who bets the bank on electric cars, on going to space, all this stuff. He's been dreaming this big since he was a 10-year-old kid. He's polarizing. He can be rude and obnoxious, but I never see those as necessarily bad qualities in a human being. Ultimately, he's a visionary, an entrepreneur, and a guy that dreams big. I think all the things that people criticised Keir Starmer for when he became Labour leader are now becoming electoral assets. They said he was too serious. They said he was a bit on the boring side. They said, that he was a lawyer. But when you have a shambolic Prime Minister, somebody who's loose with the truth, and somebody who prides himself on being able to be a buffoon, then actually, as we've seen in the pandemic, that can be a catastrophic thing for a country. And so I think that Keir Starmer and his qualities are becoming more appealing to the electorate rather than less appealing. I don't understand cultural appropriation. What does it mean? If you're celebrating another culture, what's wrong with that? You know, I'm Irish. So if people put on a green hat and drink a pint of Guinness, would I be offended? No. Why would I? If they put on an Irish accent, would I be offended? No. Why would I? I don't understand this constant need to be offended. There are far more important things in the world to get offended by. So I think cultural appropriation, if you're mocking another culture, is unacceptable. But cultural appropriation, if you're celebrating another culture, is completely acceptable. I don't think it gets plus-size models, and I think, of course, there are lots of plus-size women that want to see stuff that they can buy in magazines and so on. My problem comes when Cosmopolitan put a £310 model on the cover of their magazine with a 5-page interview inside, celebrating the fact that she was morbidly obese. By morbidly obese, I mean she was, I think, 4'11" or 5 foot tall, 310 pounds. So actually, she's going to die if she's not careful because of her excessive body weight. So rather than try and have an inspirational piece about, I've got a real problem, I need to fix it, it was a celebration of morbid obesity, and that will kill people. So we've got to be realistic about the way we tackle these things. It's not healthy to be 310 pounds and 5 foot tall. It's unhealthy to the point where you're going to die. Let's say that and help people lose weight and get fitter. And yes, I include myself in that. The problem with the BBC is it's been overtaken as an institution and the way it runs through this license fee system by the streaming company. So young people are not going to want to pay for the license fee as some form of enforced tax. Now, what they might do is do what they do with Amazon, Netflix, and all the other things you can get as a streaming service, is they might pay the BBC for stuff that they want to watch. But they're not going to do it as an obligation from the state or the government. That clock is ticking. The BBC has to present a compelling enough amount of content that people will want to treat them like a streaming service. And I think the sooner they move to that, the better. I'm joined by Talk TV's international editor Isabel Oakeshott, Talk TV presenter Richard Tice, and campaigner and leader of the True and Fair Party, Gina Miller. Well, welcome to all of you. A superstar pack, if ever there was one. Gina, so I want to start with you because Dominic Raab, his future hangs in the balance. This report into whether he's a big bully has gone to number 10. Rishi Sunak has spent hours going through it. No decision or announcement based on what he's been reading today, so we expect it tomorrow. You yourself had an experience with Raab which makes you think he is a bully.
Well, they're two different things. I've had personal experience where he was a bully to me, but this is
in what way?
So I was doing a morning Today program about the case that I brought, my first case, and in coming down from the show, in the lift, he basically called me names.
Like what?
Like can't work out if you're just a silly bitch or if you are rich. Or if you've got, or you're just naive.
He called you a silly bitch?
Yeah. Or if I was naive.
Dominic Raab called you a silly bitch?
Yeah.
Wow.
He was furious.
Wow. Well, you came here to defend him. Can you defend that?
Hang on.
Hang on.
But after that as well, when we next met at another occasion, when we were on, we were going to another Question Time show, whatever. And, you know, his behaviour was inappropriate as well on that occasion.
In what way?
And I've written, I was on the show, I was going to be there with Nish Kumar, the comedian who was on, my brother was there. And Raab sort of went up to my brother, who looks nothing like Nish, and said to him, oh, we're on together, and totally ignored me and said, we're on the show together this evening. And my brother said, no, I'm not. You know, we don't look all the same. And Raab sort of looked really embarrassed. And Nish Kumar came out and he said, well, why didn't you say hello to Gina Miller? You're on the show. She's on the panel with us tonight. And he just looked at me and walked off. And it was just a bizarre way of behaving.
I mean, that's sort of weird, inappropriate. The first thing you said,
yeah.
If Dominic Raab, who's Deputy Prime Minister, called you a silly...
Well, he wasn't then, obviously.
No, but he is now.
He wasn't.
He is now.
But what I was going to say is it's different. Is this behaviour that's going on? This report is about him being a boss across not one but 3 government departments.
Yeah, but if that's the way he spoke to a high-profile woman at the time, privately, when he doesn't think people are watching.
Well, the thing is, I think it's because he saw me as being lesser than himself.
Yeah,
I think that's what.
Okay, let me bring in Isabel because I think you came here to be defensive of him. But when you hear that as a woman, what do you think?
It's not even as a woman. I'm just actually shocked.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've known Dominic Raab since 2010, since he first came in as a backbench, newly elected Tory MP. I have never found him anything other than, at the very least, civil. I think he's got a very, very strong work ethic. He is a workaholic. I think he demands very high standards of himself and the people who work for him. And I strongly suspect that that results in him sometimes being quite
And what do you feel now you've heard
and
this?
quite demanding. So I was absolutely going to defend him on that basis. If he said that, that is
But you can also
outrageous.
go and see how he wrote about me as well and talked about me in
Yeah,
press,
but that
in media.
particular line, I
that's
mean,
the line.
Mr. Tice,
It's that phrase.
should
isn't
anyone
it?
be Deputy Prime Minister who calls women silly bitches?
I mean, that is indefensible. That's obviously the first I've heard of it. Truly shocking. And one would like to say, frankly, no. I mean, that's just an extraordinary way to carry on with anybody.
And what it makes me think, I've always looked at Rav and just thought he always looks permanently angry and has one of those mean faces. That's not enough to judge him or convict him. But I've always, none of it surprises me. I mean, he looks cheerful there in a creepy kind of Hannibal Lecter way. But what Gina's just told me, I can quite believe that.
No, it's
because
because-
my instinct about him is he is like that.
I can't believe anybody's
but
behaved
Piers,
like
it's
that.
because he didn't get it. He was angry. He was. you
Yeah,
could
but
see
it doesn't
his face.
matter.
I
It
know,
doesn't
but
matter,
what I'm
Gina.
saying is
What it
he
shows
was
me
angry
is,
because he
but what it
didn't-
shows me is he's perfectly capable of doing that to
Yeah,
you.
but this
He's
is what I
capable of
think.
any of these things.
Why
Richard, I mean-
didn't you say anything about it at the time? I mean, that
I
is
was
quite
so
a big
stunned.
story.
No, because I was being battled. No, I was being attacked from just about everywhere for the case. The last thing I wanted to do was bring more attention onto myself. And at the time, I was so stunned when the doors opened and it came out the lift. I actually couldn't believe somebody had actually just spoken to me.
This was at
like
the
that.
BBC.
Yeah, I was coming down in the lift after the Today programme.
What did you say to him?
I didn't say anything because my car came, the runner came up and sort of said, "Your car's here, Mrs. Miller," and I went off.
Is it
and in the
possible
way,
you misheard?
And in the way, no, in the way, and the reason I know that is because I've got this thing, a weird habit. I write things down, and so
Right.
I actually have the diary from
Wow.
the time
Unbelievable.
where I
But-
wrote it down.
Have you ever talked about this before?
Well, not
Not
quite
that.
like
It's Morgan
this, but
exclusive.
also no. I did do an article in the Independent. They checked, and they saw my entry.
You
in my
didn't
diary.
include that particular part.
I said that he'd not that particular phrasing, but I mean,
I got to say that to me is a big development
It's
in this because it
problematic.
shows to me this is a guy who talks to women like you like that. That's pretty shocking.
I mean, I want ministers to be demanding of civil servants to get performance, so they're held to account and they deliver for taxpayers who pay their salaries. But we do not want ministers behaving like that, frankly, with anybody.
But what I'm saying is, this is somebody who, which plays into what Piers is saying, is about this is somebody who, when it's juniors or maybe some people he doesn't see as being on the same level as himself, has a sustained pattern of behaviour.
Well, it says to me,
which
he's just
is
a nasty
bullying.
piece of work and a bully.
Which is bullying. It's bullying.
And so, therefore, it makes me think that, I mean, let's see what the report says, but there's so many people have
There's
come up
so
with
many
similar
people.
stories. It's like eventually, you know, can he really be an innocent guy when we just said that?
Well, I think Sunak's got a real problem because the thing is, if he says no, Rab stays, there's a whole load of civil servants who are saying that they're going to walk, and they could bring individual cases against Rab. So this is not over by a long way.
I think we should obviously see how it all goes, but then maybe reconvene afterwards, maybe
Yeah.
next week, because it's going to be a big story.
Yeah.
We've actually run out of time, but this was such an enthralling development.